You probably don't realize it yet, but the life you hate living today came from decisions that you made years ago. The funny part is, most people, even the smart ones, still defend the decisions that ruined their lives. For example, do you remember the name Kodak? Back in the 70s, they held 85% market share in cameras and 90% in films. And above that, one of their engineers, Steve Sasson, built the world's first self-contained digital camera prototype in December 1975. So, they were on their way to be the pioneers of the new world of photography. They could become truly unstoppable. And what did the leadership do? They suppressed the tech to protect their film sales. An inspired move that reduced their market share from 90% to 7% by 2010. Long story short, your intelligence and resources are useless if your decision making lets you down. And it can work the other way around too. For example, Reed Hastings' call to pivot Netflix from DVD rentals to streaming made him an industry leader rather than go extinct like their then competitor, Blockbuster. If you're watching this, I bet you have felt it already. Making the right decisions is not something that you can get good at on your own. You need to learn both the science and the art behind it. And by the end of this video, you will learn everything that you need to know. So let's get started with why do people make bad decisions to begin with. You need to understand this. Our brains don't judge reality objectively. Instead, our perception is almost always clouded by emotions, ego, fear, stress, and social pressure. We can't just switch them off because that's what being a human is. We don't make decisions in a vacuum, and that's okay. But sometimes it can be messy without you even realizing it. Because your brain tricks you into a bad decision that you are left defending for the rest of your life. I'm talking about a combination of cognitive bias and sunk cost fallacy. Due to cognitive bias, we become so emotionally invested in a bad decision that we seek information that backs up our existing beliefs and overlook any warning signs. And then, because of sunk cost fallacy, we refuse to course correct because we have already invested time, money, and emotion. That's why it feels so harder to leave than to continue. So now, when you see people stay too long in failing careers, unhealthy relationships, and bad financial situations, you know why. Here's how to make it less intimidating. I learned this from Jeff Bezos. Not all decisions deserve the same level of fear. According to Bezos, there are two types of decisions. Type 1 decisions are hard to reverse. These include selling your company, taking on huge debt, choosing a life partner, signing agreements that permanently limit your options. These decisions deserve time and careful thinking. Then there are type 2 decisions. These are reversible. If things go wrong, you can usually change direction without destroying your future. Example, starting a YouTube channel, applying for jobs, posting online, tasting a business idea, learning new skills. Most people confuse the two. Separating permanent decisions from reversible ones reduces unnecessary fear. As a result, people stop wasting massive amount of mental energy on decisions that can easily be corrected later. This is one reason why successful people often appear more confident. They simply treat reversible decisions as reversible. Another fact that helps is you actually don't need to know everything to begin. In fact, you actually need just about 70% of the information. This is actually one of Bezos' most famous tactics. According to him, if you wait until you have 90% or 100% certainty before making a decision, you are probably moving too slowly. While I do understand why you might want to know everything before making a call, but what you're trying to avoid is going to happen anyways, because no matter what you do, there will always be trade-offs. So, the analysis paralysis you are putting yourself through is actually for nothing. On the contrary, it is actually better to accept the idea of trade-off and use the information you have accordingly. I know what you're thinking. What if I make the wrong decision? Well, when it comes to investment, long-term investments are generally safer than the short-term ones. That's why their decision makers think in decades. The human brain is naturally biased toward the immediate emotional relief. In psychology, we call this temporal discounting. Short-term thinking reduces discomfort now. That's why people tend to value short-term rewards more heavily than future rewards, even when the long-term option is objectively better. And that's exactly what keeps most people average. On the contrary, people who outperform the rest look at things from a bird's eye view. For example, if someone believes they still have 30 productive years, multiple career pivots ahead, time to build new skills, time to recover from mistakes, then failure stops feeling final Another way to minimize the risk factor in your decision making is by accepting that what you do after the decision is made is important too. Most people think that smart decision makers really fail, but in reality, they fail all the time. In fact, they're used to seeing businesses fail, investments fail, plans collapse, and predictions that turn out wrong. The difference is that they recover faster than anyone else because they back up their decision making with their insane resourcefulness. And that difference compounds over time. A decision, no matter how good it is always made with limited information. If you're rigid, you keep defending old decisions even when they are actively hurting you. This is why adaptability matters more than perfection. A mistake becomes manageable when someone can respond with critical thinking instead of ego. That's when failure stops feeling catastrophic. You can always recover, correct direction, and continue moving. And that is the real skill. Because your future is rarely built on motivation alone. More often, it is shaped by small decisions combined over time. And it all comes down to one question. Why? Why are you making the decisions that you're making? What are you trying to achieve? What are your goals? Because if you have goals that contradict with each other, both your decision making and the trajectory of your growth will suffer. Here's something that might be helpful. Also, you can decide to like and subscribe. That's something you won't regret. I'll just leave you with that, and thanks for watching.